There is something quietly wonderful about a straight line. Think about it for a moment. Just let the idea settle gently. A line that simply goes. Doesn't wander. Doesn't wobble. Doesn't decide halfway along that it would rather curl around that hill over there, or duck into that little valley, or take a small detour past that interesting-looking pond. Just a long, patient, steady line, stretching out ahead of you as far as you can see, until it disappears into the soft blur of a distant afternoon. That is what a Roman road was. A long, calm, magnificent straight line laid carefully across the land, across muddy marshes and open fields, over rivers and through dark forests, up the sides of hills and down the other side, with a kind of quiet, unhurried certainty that is rather lovely to think about. And here is something that might make you feel a warm little sense of wonder before this story has even properly begun, in many places in the world. Right now. Tonight. Those roads are still there. Still patient. Still straight. Still lying quietly underneath fields and forests, and sometimes underneath the very roads that cars drive along today. Some of the roads we use in the modern world are built right on top of roads that were laid down nearly 2,000 years ago by people who wore sandals and togas and had never once seen a car or an airplane or an electric light. Isn't that something? Let's wander along one of those roads together, very slowly, and find out how it came to be. It begins, as so many things begin, with a question. The Romans had built a very large empire. You probably know something about the Romans. They are one of those subjects that turns up in school and in museums and in those programs about ancient history where someone with muddy boots digs carefully in a field. The Roman Empire, at its very height, stretched from the cool, rainy island of Britain all the way to the dry, sun-baked deserts of Egypt and beyond. It was a truly enormous place. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of square miles of land, full of cities and towns and farms and mountains and forests, and all sorts of people speaking all sorts of different languages. And the Romans had a problem. How do you hold all of that together? How do you send a message from Rome to a soldier stationed somewhere on the far edge of the empire? Somewhere cold and distant that would take weeks to reach, and have any hope of things going smoothly. How do you move your armies quickly when they are needed? How do you make sure that olive oil and grain and pottery and cloth and all the ordinary things that people need to live can travel from one part of the empire to another without getting hopelessly lost in a tangle of muddy tracks? The answer, the Romans decided, was roads. Proper roads. The best roads anyone had ever built. Roads so good that they would last for centuries. Roads so straight and so solid that nothing could really go wrong with them. And so they built them. The first thing a Roman road needed, even before anyone picked up a stone or touched a shovel, was a plan. And the Romans were very, very good at planning. There would be surveyors. That is the name for the people whose job it was to work out exactly where the road should go. And they had a beautiful little tool to help them called a groma. A groma. Say it gently. Groma. Was a simple thing, really. Imagine a wooden pole stuck in the ground. At the top of the pole, a piece of wood crossed another piece of wood in a kind of X shape, perfectly horizontal, perfectly level. And from each of the four ends of this X, a small weight hung down on a thin cord. When the weight stopped swinging and hung perfectly still, the surveyor could look along the groma, squint down it, really, and see exactly where the straight line went. Can you imagine being that surveyor? Standing on a hillside, maybe on a clear morning, the birds just beginning to stir, and looking down the groma across the open land below. Watching as your assistants moved a pole further and further away until you called out, "There! Stop there! That's the line." And the assistant would plant a marker in the ground. And then they would all move forward and do it again, and again, and again, all the way to the horizon. That was how the Romans kept their roads straight. One careful measurement after another. Patient as anything, never in a rush. Now, here is one of the most interesting things about Roman roads. They were almost always straight, yes. But not because the Romans didn't know how to go around things. They knew perfectly well. They were clever people. The reason they chose straight lines was much more practical than that. A soldier marching in a straight line gets to where he is going faster than a soldier who wanders around. A merchant with a cart full of pottery gets to market sooner if the road doesn't take unnecessary detours. And when you are building roads all across an enormous empire, hundreds and hundreds of miles of road in every direction, the straightest distance really is the kindest. It saves time. It saves effort. It saves wear on shoes and carts and the patience of everyone involved. So the surveyors would plot the straightest possible route, and when there was a hill in the way, the road would simply go over it. Not around it, over it. The Romans would rather climb and descend a hill than lose the line. And they were quite unapologetic about this. Isn't that funny, really, when you think about it? We might look at a hill and think, well, let's go the easy way Let's curve around the side. The Romans would look at that same hill and think, no, the road goes straight. We'll deal with the hill. And then they would. Because they had a great many workers and a great deal of patience, and they were not the sort of people who let a hill get in the way of a good road. So the line was drawn. The surveyors had done their work. Now it was time to actually build the thing. And this is where it gets wonderfully detailed. The workers, and there were often a very great number of them, sometimes whole legions of Roman soldiers working alongside local laborers, would first clear the ground along the route. Trees came down, bushes were pulled up, the earth was leveled as much as possible. Then they would dig. A Roman road was not, as you might imagine, just a flat path of stones lying on the ground. Oh no, a Roman road was built from the bottom up, layer by careful layer, like a very large and very serious sandwich. First came the digging, a trench, sometimes quite deep. Maybe the length of a forearm deep, sometimes a little more, depending on the ground. This trench defined the width of the road and gave the builders somewhere to work. Then, at the very bottom, came the foundation layer. This was often made of large, flat stones, or sometimes a thick layer of rammed earth, depending on what was available nearby. The Romans were practical about using local materials when they could. Big stones went in first, fitted together as snugly as possible, like the beginning of a very wide, very flat wall. But lying on its side, underground, where almost no one would ever see it. This foundation layer had one job: to be solid. To be the bedrock on which everything else rested. To say, quietly and without any fuss, I am not going anywhere. On top of the foundation stones came a layer of smaller rubble, broken rock, gravel, rough material, packed in tightly. Then on top of that, another layer, smoother this time, fine gravel, perhaps sand mixed in, packed down firmly. The Romans would use heavy wooden tools and the weight of many feet to compact each layer until it was as solid as it could possibly be. And finally, on top of all of that, like the top slice of the sandwich, the bit everyone actually sees, came the paving. Large, flat stones, fitted together with enormous care, smooth enough to walk on, solid enough to last. And the whole thing was slightly curved across its width. Not flat, like a table, but gently rounded across the middle, what engineers call a camber, so that when rain fell on the road, it ran off to the sides rather than sitting in puddles and slowly turning the surface to mud. The Romans had thought of that too. They thought of most things. On either side of the road, They dug drainage ditches, long, straight channels running parallel to the road, carrying rainwater away and keeping the road from becoming soggy. Standing at the edge of a Roman road and looking across, you might see the ditch on your left, then a low bank, then the raised road itself, curving slightly in the middle, then another low bank, then another ditch on your right. It all made a kind of quiet, functional sense. Everything with a purpose, everything thought through. And between the road surface and the ditches, on either side, there was often a path, a gravel verge, or packed earth, where animals could walk without damaging the stone surface. Because the stone surface, that beautiful smooth paving on top, was rather precious. It cost a great deal of effort to lay, and the Romans were not particularly keen on horses and mules wearing it down faster than necessary. So the animals walked beside it, and the stones stayed smoother for longer. Can you picture all of this? The long, straight road rising slightly above the level of the surrounding land. Because all those layers underneath have lifted it up, with its ditches on either side, and its gentle camber shedding the rain, and its flat stone surface stretching away into the distance, one flat stone after another, fitted together like a puzzle that took very skilled hands to solve. It is quite a picture. Now, laying all that stone was painstaking, patient work. The men who did it were, very often, soldiers. The Roman legions, the great armies of Rome, were not only fighters, they were builders. Every Roman soldier was trained to build as well as to march and to fight. The legions carried tools with them wherever they went, picks and shovels, measuring rods, stakes, rope. When there was no battle to be fought, there was always something to be built. A road, a camp, a wall. And so, across the empire, you would sometimes find a long stretch of Roman countryside and, moving slowly through it, a group of soldiers working methodically along the line of a new road. Some digging, some carrying stone, some fitting the paving pieces together, crouching on the earth, turning a stone this way and that, finding the angle that made it lie flush and firm. Some packing the rubble layers down with heavy wooden rams, all of them moving slowly, steadily, without great urgency. Because they knew, those soldiers knew, that this road they were building would outlast them, that someone else would walk along it long after they were gone, that long after their names were forgotten, the road would still be there, patient and straight, going quietly about its business. And they were right. The Romans built roads all across their empire. The total length of all the roads they built, if you could somehow pick them all up and lay them end to end. All the roads from Britain and France and Spain and Germany and Italy and Greece and Turkey and North Africa and Egypt and everywhere else would stretch for something like 400,000 kilometers. Which is, when you let that settle in, a truly astonishing amount of road. There were main roads and smaller roads, and roads between the main roads. There were roads that connected Rome to the great cities of the empire, and roads that branched off those main roads to reach smaller towns, and smaller roads that reached even smaller towns, and so on, spreading out and out, like the branches of a very large tree, reaching into every corner of the empire. And all of it, or almost all of it, built with that same patient care, layer by layer, stone by stone. The great roads had names. In Britain, which the Romans called Britannia, there was a road called Ermine Street, though that name came later, given by the Anglo-Saxons who found the road still standing long after the Romans had gone. And Watling Street, another great Roman road running across the island with that same steady Roman determination. And the Fosse Way, which crossed Britain in a long diagonal, straight as a ruled line. In Italy, the oldest and most famous road of all was the Via Appia, the Appian Way. It was built more than 2,000 years ago, and parts of it are still there today, just outside Rome, where you can walk on the very same stones that Roman sandals wore smooth. The paving stones are large and flat and fitted together with that same careful craftsmanship. And if you walk along it in the quiet of a morning, with the birds making their gentle sounds in the trees, it is possible to feel a faint something. A kind of connection, perhaps, to all the feet that have walked that same path. That is a rather wonderful thing to carry with you as you drift towards sleep. The idea that a path can outlast almost everything. Outlast the people who built it. Outlast the empire that ordered it built. Outlast languages and kingdoms and centuries of change, and still just be there, quietly, for anyone who wants to walk along it. And what about when the road came to a river? A road can't stop for a river. That would rather defeat the purpose. The Romans built bridges, hundreds and hundreds of bridges all across the empire. And their bridges were, like their roads, made with a kind of patient engineering that held up for a very long time. Some Roman bridges are still standing and still in use today. Bridges that carry modern traffic over rivers built by people who have been gone for nearly 2,000 years. The secret to a Roman bridge, very often, was the arch. A beautiful thing, the arch. When you curve stones into that rounded shape, each stone pressing against the next, each one held in place by the ones on either side. They support each other so efficiently that the whole structure becomes surprisingly strong. The arch doesn't fight the weight pressing down on it. It uses that weight. It leans into it. And so it holds. The Romans understood arches very well and used them everywhere. In bridges, in aqueducts, those long, elegant structures that carried water from mountains to cities, marching across valleys on rows of arches, like something from a gentle dream. In doorways and windows and great public buildings, but especially in bridges. So when a Roman road reached a river, there was usually a bridge, wide enough for 2 carts to pass each other, solid enough to take the weight of an army marching across. Carefully built, stone by careful stone, lasting and lasting and lasting. Along the road, at regular intervals, there were milestones. A milestone was exactly what it sounds like. A stone marker placed at the side of the road to tell travelers how far they had come or how far they had yet to go. The Romans measured their distances in miles, and their mile was based on 1,000 paces, 1,000 double steps of a marching soldier. The word mile, in fact, comes from the Latin word mille, which simply means 1,000. And so every 1,000 paces, a stone. These milestones were usually column-shaped. A round stone pillar, maybe as tall as a person's waist, standing at the edge of the road. They would have writing on them, the name of the emperor sometimes, and the distance to the nearest town or to Rome itself. A traveler making a long journey, perhaps walking for days, carrying a pack, heading from one city to another, might look forward to the milestones. Each one was a small reassurance. A quiet confirmation that progress was being made. One stone, then another, then another, each stone meaning 1,000 more paces walked, 1,000 paces closer to wherever they were going. There is something peaceful about that idea, the patient counting of steps, the steady accumulation of small distances into a long journey, one stone at a time. People from all sorts of places used Roman roads. Soldiers, of course, marching in their long columns, their armor clinking gently, their sandals striking the stone in a steady rhythm. The roads were built partly for soldiers, so that armies could move quickly across the empire whenever they were needed, but merchants too. Men with carts piled high with goods, amphorae full of olive oil or wine, bolts of cloth, crates of pottery, sacks of grain. The roads made trade possible in a way that muddy, winding tracks never could. A merchant with a good road beneath his wheels could travel much further in a day, reach more markets, carry more goods. And ordinary people, families moving from one town to another, travelers on pilgrimages, messengers carrying letters and official documents for the government, doctors traveling to patients in distant towns, tradespeople following the roads from job to job. And at intervals along the busiest roads, there were inns, places where a weary traveler could stop for the night, rest tired feet, have something to eat, and sleep in a real bed rather than under a hedge. These inns, in Latin, were called mansiones, literally places to stay. From that word, very distantly, we eventually get our modern word mansion. Though a Roman roadside inn was probably rather less grand than a mansion and rather more likely to smell of horses, the roads were alive with people. Dawn to dusk, there would be someone on a Roman road. A legionary, a merchant, a child running ahead of her family, a man with a mule, a woman with a basket, all of them on the same smooth stone surface, all of them following the same long, straight line toward wherever they needed to be. Here is something that might slow your thoughts down pleasantly. Think about a stretch of Roman road somewhere in Britain, in a green, quiet field, in the countryside, on a gray autumn afternoon. The Romans left Britain a very long time ago, so long ago that it is almost impossible to really feel how long. But the road is still there, under the grass. Farmers have plowed their fields around it for centuries and not quite managed to remove it. Because those layers, the foundation stones, the rubble, the packed gravel, the paving on top, go down too deep. The road just keeps being there, stubborn and patient and quiet, doing nothing in particular, waiting. And sometimes, after a long rain, or when the light falls at a certain angle in the late afternoon, you can see the faint rise of the old road in the field. A gentle ridge running across the landscape in a perfectly straight line, going somewhere. Going nowhere, just being what it always was. The Romans called a road that had fallen out of use a via derelicta, an abandoned way. But abandoned is perhaps too sad a word for something that still sits so solidly in the earth, that still tells you which way is straight, that still points quietly to where a town once stood, or where a river was once bridged, or where a milestone once said, in neat Roman letters, 9 miles to the next town. It is worth pausing here for a moment to think about the people who built the roads, not the generals who ordered them, not the surveyors who drew the lines. The people who actually picked up the stones, we don't know most of their names. That is one of the things about ordinary work. The people who do it quietly and without glory tend not to have their names written down. The emperor who commissioned a road might get his name on the milestone. The workers who laid every stone of it are mostly lost to history. But they were real. They had tired backs and calloused hands. They worked in sun and in rain. They carried stones that were heavy and set them down carefully in the right place. They spent their days bent close to the ground, fitting one flat stone against another, making sure the surface was level and firm and smooth. And their work, their quiet, unremarkable, physically demanding, everyday work, lasted for 2,000 years. There is something quite touching about that when you let yourself think about it slowly. The idea that ordinary people, doing ordinary work carefully and well, can leave something in the world that outlasts almost everything. That the unnamed worker who spent a Tuesday morning in the year 80 fitting a particular paving stone into a road in the English countryside, and then stood up and stretched his back and perhaps squinted at the sky to guess the weather. That person's work is still there, still in the earth, still solid. The road does not ask you to hurry. That is one of the loveliest things about imagining a Roman road on a quiet day. There is no urgency in it. The road simply is. It has been there for centuries and will likely be there for centuries more. A few more years, a few more travelers, a few more seasons of rain and frost. The road has seen all of that before. It is not troubled. And there is something in that steadiness, that calm, unhurried endurance, that feels rather like the way sleep comes when you don't chase it. When you just lie still and let your thoughts slow down and allow the quiet to spread through you gradually, the way a road spreads gradually across a landscape, one careful stone after another. Let's walk a little further along our road, just for the pleasure of it, before we reach the end. It is a fine morning, let's say. Early. The light is still soft and slightly golden. The road stretches ahead, straight and solid, the paving stones catching the low sun at an angle that makes them glow a little. On either side, the drainage ditches are just visible. A slight darkening of the earth, a line of coarser grass where the ground is a little wetter than the road itself. Not many people about yet. Perhaps a merchant with a cart just visible in the far distance, a small moving shape on the long straight line, a bird or two picking at the verge. Otherwise, quiet. You are walking at a slow pace. There is no need to rush. The road knows where it is going. It has always known. You just follow it. Underfoot, the paving stones are firm and slightly rough, not slippery, because the Romans chose stone with a surface that gave good grip even in wet weather. They thought of that too. The stones are large. Many of them, the width of both your hands spread flat, and they fit together so well that the joins are barely noticeable. The surface is almost seamless, almost level, curved just slightly across its width so that if it rains, the water will run gently to the sides and away. You pass a milestone. A round stone column, about waist high, standing quietly at the right side of the road. There is lettering on it, worn by weather but still legible if you look closely. A number. A name. a fragment of information about a town that is some miles further along this road. You don't stop long. The milestone notes your passing without comment, as it has noted the passing of everyone who has walked this way before you. The road rises gently here, a low hill ahead, and the road simply goes over it. No curve, no detour, just straight up the slope and straight down the other side. You climb at the same slow pace. At the top, you can see the road ahead and the road behind, and it is exactly as straight from up here as it looks from below. A long, unwavering line across the landscape, connecting one side of the hill to the other without any apology for the gradient. You stand at the top for a moment. Look both ways along the road. Feel the slight effort of the climb in your legs. Take a breath. Then, you begin to walk down the other side. Eventually, all Roman roads led to Rome, or so they used to say. There was a golden milestone, literally a pillar covered in gilded bronze. That stood in the Forum in Rome, at the very center of the city. It was called the Militarium Aureum, which means the golden milestone, and it was considered to be the symbolic point from which all the roads of the empire radiated. Every road, everywhere, led back to this one point in this one city. It was a beautiful idea, even if in practical terms the road system was rather more complicated than that. The idea that all roads, all those long, patient, straight lines stretching across the known world, had a common origin, a single point from which all the distances were measured, is the kind of idea that settles nicely in the mind as you grow drowsy. All roads beginning in the same place. All roads spreading outward from one golden stone in one ancient city, reaching across mountains and rivers and marshes and forests, carrying people and goods and messages and armies and merchants and ordinary families on ordinary journeys. All of it connected, all of it part of one great network, one enormous map drawn in stone across the land. And now, very slowly, the road is growing quieter. The morning is a little further along. The light has softened from gold to pale white. The merchant's cart, which was just visible in the distance a while ago, is gone around a gentle bend, or perhaps it has arrived wherever it was going. The birds have settled somewhere in the grass beside the road. The milestone stands as it always stands. The road stretches ahead, straight and patient into the soft blur of the distance. The foundation stones beneath your feet are so deep and so solid that you cannot feel them exactly. But you know they are there. Layer after layer, each one packed down and settled, each one doing its quiet job of being solid, being the ground that holds everything else up. The rubble layer, the gravel, the sand, the paving stones on top, worn smooth in the middle where the feet and the wheels have passed for so long. All of it still there. Still doing what it was built to do. Somewhere, very far away, in a field in Britain, or in the countryside outside Rome, or along a road in France that cars still drive along today, the same foundation stones are lying in the same positions they were placed in by the same careful, tired hands 2,000 years ago. And they are not going anywhere. They are simply there, as roads tend to be. Present and patient and waiting, very quietly, for the next traveler to come along and walk the line they have been holding all this time. The drainage ditches on either side have grown over with grass and small wildflowers. The milestones stand, or have fallen, or have been taken away and built into walls somewhere. The road itself has changed and been repaired and covered over and uncovered again many times. But the foundation is still there, and that is enough. That is, when you think about it gently, quite a remarkable enough thing to carry into sleep. A road built with patience and skill and honest labor, layer by careful layer, stone by careful stone. A road that went straight because someone held a groma steady against the wind and squinted along it and said, "There. That's the line." A road that went over hills rather than around them, because the line mattered, because the straightness was the point. A road that outlasted the people who built it, and the empire that ordered it, and the language it was named in. Still there. Still patient. Still straight. The road does not hurry. The road has never hurried. It simply goes on, laying itself across the land in that long, even, unhurried way, one stone after another, stretching further than you can see, going quietly toward wherever it was always going, in no particular rush to arrive, content simply to be the road. The foundation stones are cool and deep in the earth. The drainage ditches are full of grass and silence. The milestone stands at the edge. And somewhere, very far away, a surveyor is holding a groma quite still and looking along it at a point in the far distance and saying, very quietly, "There. That's the line."